Oh well, Lion stole the show again. He loves his daddy. Anyway, welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is entitled Getting a Cable Modem. Alright, so let's see, this has to go back to 1998. I think late in 1998. He stole the show. It's all over. So the hell with my cable modem. Anyway, new location just to change it up a bit. Anyhow, getting a cable modem late 1998. Cable service that we had here at the time was owned by a company called Cablevision, which is now Altice USA, which is not a company you want to be with, but the other option is Verizon, and I've already had it out with them, so that leaves me with nothing else. So that's that. Anyhow, it was called Optimum Online, now just called Optimum. Lion sat down on my lap. But anyway, back in those days, it was a different world as far as cable modems. These days, and I know this varies across the region and in different places, but here at the time, if you wanted a cable modem, you would call the cable company and say, I want a cable modem. And then you would pay for the modem outright in full, which at the time was around $250. And I paid that. I was working for the Wiz at the time, and they had a deal for employees like that where I think we got the service for free. I don't know if they would even do such a thing these days, but anyway, back then we did get the service for free, but you did have to pay for the modem, so I did pay the $250 for that. But they also would take it out of your paycheck in like $50 installments if you wanted. So I opted for that because there was no financing for it, so why not? And I was at my parents' house still back in these days. Well, also in these days, it was not a what they call a self-provisioning type thing where you could go to, like our cable company has these quote-unquote walk-in centers where you say, I want a cable modem, and they hand it to you over the counter, and you take it home and hook it up. No. Back in these days, this was different. These were what I like to call the old analog cable modems. That's what they called them, but I don't know that it was or how any of this worked. Here's what I can tell you. In the preceding years, they did run new cable wires throughout the town and the area and much of Long Island. And they would have to verify your address to see that the service was available at your address, and it was. And anyway, you set up a time and a date, and they would show up. So a van showed up, and not one, but two guys came out. They had two people for this. One was the quote-unquote linesman who went up on the pole and took care of the outside wiring, and the other guy was the software PC configure guy, and he would set your computer up for that. If you didn't have an Ethernet port on your computer, then you could purchase an Ethernet card, and they would install that as well. I already had Ethernet on my system at the time, which was a brand new at the time Dell Dimension R450, I think it was. And it was a Pentium 2 450 megahertz. Funny side note, when I told my uncle about that system, he said, Pentium 2? Why didn't you wait for Pentium 3? And I immediately quipped back and said, because if I waited for Pentium 3, you would have said, why didn't you wait for Pentium 4? So that was what I got. It cost a bundle, maybe almost like 4 grand. It was decked out with 128 megabytes of RAM, 17.1 gigabyte hard drive, which was a Maxter no less. Turtle Beach Voyetra sound card, some sort of video card, AGP. I don't remember what it was exactly. Uh, 2.1 Altic Lansing speakers, which I still have to this day. In fact, I have all of the components of that system to this day. And it even had a DVD-ROM drive. I later added a CD burner, and it also had an iOmega Zip 100 megabyte drive internal to it. And of course, floppy was standard in these days, so that was the deal with that. Anyway, so two guys jump out, and the first is the cable guy who goes up on the pole. Yes, they had to run a new cable line to your house for the modem specifically. Well, the problem was cable service enters here on the house, computers over here. So that had to be run throughout the house. So the way this was done was through the basement ceiling. So the guy actually had to drill through the house and put a new cable in. My dad was very squeamish about this shit back in the day. Don't let him touch anything. Don't let him do anything. So, long and short of it was, we ended up getting the job done. I helped the guy with it because getting the way the basement was finished with the walls, it jutted out from the concrete foundation like almost one floor joist bay. And we had to like drill a large hole there to find the cable that came. It was a mess. There was a drop ceiling, and I had opened up pretty much like every other ceiling tile. And that was kind of the deal how it worked. And I sort of ran the cable through the ceiling in the basement. And the cable guy pretty much just hung out. Now, while he was outside getting his truck configured and putting the cones out and getting everything set up and his big spool of wire and shit like that, getting all of that done, the other guy, who I called Chief because he was Indian, was there, and he said, let me see your computer. And I said, sure, absolutely. So we went down to the basement, and I showed it to him, and he's like, okay, good, and he sort of just poked around in the system a little bit. I watched what he was doing. He was on the ball. And while the cable guy was outside running the wire, he said, can I check my email? I said, do you, like now? I mean, don't you want to wait till the cable modem is hooked up? He said, no, now. I said, yeah, it was dial-up. He's like, it's okay, So I'm like, okay. So I think I had AOL dial-up at the time, and I logged in with that, and I said, who's your email? He said, hotmail.com. Anyways, he checked his email on dial-up, and the cable guy ran the wire, and we did all that stuff. And finally, we got the modem. While I was running the cable wire through the ceiling in the basement, or maybe it was the day before, I found a dead mouse in the ceiling. And immediately you might go, oh, what the hell kind of mouse-infested house was this shit? What kind of slum were you living in, Jake? That's actually fairly normal, believe it or not. I've gotten a mouse or two in this house as well. And it just happens. It happens most often when there is construction going on in the neighborhood, because mice tend to find somewhere in the house where they can get in and sort of stay there if they can and sneak out to get food or whatever that when they can. But when there's construction, like especially if they knock a house down, they scatter and they find a new place, and that could be your house. So yes, a mouse in the house is not completely out of the question. It most certainly can and does happen. Anyway, that was that. Let me just see if there was anything else that I wanted to mention about that. That was pretty much the deal. The guy hooked the cable modem up, and oh, here was an interesting thing. Like I said, they called this the analog modem. Um, the analog modem was, it created a LAN that was also a WAN. So it made it made a local area network out of a wide area network. In these days, Windows 98 was it. And as far as passwords on your computer to log in, Microsoft accounts, and all this other crazy security shit just for you to use your own device didn't exist. You turn it on, the Windows 98 splash screen would come up, and you'd be into Windows, and then you would do whatever you would do. Now, granted, before cable modem, 90% of what I did on the computer was on the computer. 10% was on the internet over dial-up. When a cable modem came in, now you had this huge bandwidth to download and do all kinds of stuff that you never could do before. Napster, anybody remember? Yeah, so downloading MP3s over dial-up, 20 minutes if you were lucky. Over a cable modem, mere seconds. So it opened up avenues after avenues, and even interstates is what it opened up. But like I said, it made a WAN out of the LAN. And what I mean by that was, if I went to, what did they call it back in those days? Network neighborhood. Now network, or it was My Network Places for a while. Anyways, you went to that, and you waited for a little bit. And people had a tendency to name their computer using their last name, which wasn't a bad idea until you saw Smith pop up in Network Neighborhood. Smith? That's not one of my machines. There's drives. Drive C. Holy shit. Here's all this guy's stuff. We didn't have routers, we didn't have firewalls, none of this shit existed. And there was indeed a time where I found a computer on Network Neighborhood, and I went into it, and the guy had a copy of AOL installed. If you remember the old AOL software, which traditionally was used with dial-up, but later on with high-speed internet connections, you did have an option to store your password within the AOL application. They weren't called apps back then, they were applications. Just like in your kitchen, you don't plug in a blender and call it an app. It's an appliance. You're applying the usage of electricity to the item. This was an application. It was something you would apply to the computer to enhance functionality. So it wasn't just an app or an applet, if anybody remembers those terms. It was an application. Anyway, there it was, AOL. Now, if you didn't have this on your own computer, there were keys in the registry, and a lot of times it wouldn't work. I had AOL installed on the computer. AOL.exe. It loaded. The guy's username was there. The password you didn't see, but the saved password was definitely there. Sign on. Welcome. You've got mail. it fucking worked. Now, I didn't do anything with this. I just did it just to see if it would actually work, but it absolutely did. And I logged on using this guy's AOL account. Like I said, the only thing I did after it said, "Welcome, you've got mail," is I signed out. That was all I ever did with it because I was not in, I knew hacking this or spamming it or anything like that was really, really bad news. So I did not get into that whatsoever. I simply did it just to see if it would work, and it did. Now, sometime within the next year, that went away, and you didn't see it anymore. And then later on, there was this new thing out there called a router. Ooh, what's that? I actually learned about that from my friend Brian, who has since moved many, many years ago, and he had one because they had multiple computers in the house, and you could share the internet, share the high-speed internet connection. So I got a router. Now, this was poo-pooed by the cable company at the time, and they always swore up and down that if you had a router, you would get no support whatsoever. Your cable modem was meant for one PC and one PC only, and that was that. Later on, they had to relent. By the way, my first router I bought from Tiny Middle, $200 for a 4-port wired router from Linksys, the BEFS41, I think it was. BEFS41, yeah. That was the de facto standard in routers back in the day, the old good blue Linksys box. And man, that thing was a fucking workhorse. And it actually came with me to this house from, when did I get that? Maybe 1999? All the way till 2006, 7, maybe even 8. I think more like 2007. So I ran that thing for about 8 years, and it was a workhorse. From what I understood, the WAN port on it, though, was only a 10 megabit connection. However, in those days, you didn't have high-speed internet. You had high-speed internet, but you weren't getting anywhere near the kind of speeds today. You can get gigabit service these days. That didn't exist in those days. You were getting 1 to 3, maybe 3 to 5 megabits per second, and it was blazing fast in those days. And of course, websites still were very simple, still mostly geared to dial-up, and loaded practically instantly. Oh, big file download for 56K modem users. Remember those? Yeah, and it was like 9.87 megabytes. Click. Okay, here it is. Damn, that was fast. It was fast. In fact, Optimum had a commercial back in those days where they had some guy in a dark blouse saying, "Yo, man, Optimum Online is stupid fast." It's stupid. That's what it was. Anyway, the analog modem, I misspoke earlier. The analog modem was included with the service when you got cable modem service, but when they went to the digital ones, then you had to pay for it. So what happened was over the years, they phased these out. Why they had them in the first place, I don't know. Got a good deal on them. I don't even remember the brand. It was owned by the cable company, so it's long gone. The case of this thing was metal, and the top was a huge heatsink, had fins on it. And the front of it had 4 lights. Doot, 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 doot. Right there. And the plastic was molded to show you what the lights were. But the problem was I had the cable modem on top of the tower under the desk, so I had to kind of like to look at the lights. The lights were behind the plastic bezels, so you had to go down there to look. There was no diffuser or anything over it, but that modem just kept losing connection, and it was because they were phasing out the analog as they called it, modems, and that was the deal. But anyway, yeah, that was getting a cable modem. It was quite an ordeal back in the day. It opened up new avenues, allowed you to do all kinds of stuff you never could do before, and it was the greatest thing. And when people would come over, they're like, "You have a cable modem?" Even the whiff came over, and she's like, "What do you mean you don't have to go to AOL? What do you mean you just click the E, Internet Explorer?" I said, "No, look, do it." She clicks the E. She's like, "This is just, it just works? It's just online?" I said, "Yeah, type in any website you want." And it just loaded right up. And she was like, "How the fuck is that possible?" Because everybody was used to dial-up. And as we got faster and faster dial-up modems, web pages became more and more complicated and file sizes got bigger and bigger. Nowadays, your internet connection speed, unless you have 64 kids and they're all trying to stream Netflix and Hulu instead of doing their homework, and you're just trying to relax after a day's work on the big screen watching your shit streaming, this was it worked. Nowadays, like I said, the company is owned by Altice, and secretly, quietly, and without telling anybody, they just fucked everyone over. I had 100 megabit per second down and 35 megabit per second up. And then, not long ago, I went to upload a file to YouTube, and it just took damn near forever. I said, "What the fuck?" So I ran a speed test, and my down was damn near close to 100, and my up, 5. Only 5. Down from 35. Time to reboot the modem. Well, I left it for a bit because it was windy and stormy out. So I said, sometimes it just sort of fixes itself. So I left it for a day. And the next day it was still slow. And I said, okay, it's time for a reboot. So I rebooted. And it came back up. And I did a speed test. And guess what? 5. They fucked everyone. And just shut the upload speed from 35 down to 5. 7 times 5 is 35. That means everything I upload takes 7 times longer than it used to. Want faster upload? Oh, sure, you can get it, but even their top tier, which is maybe gigabit, maybe 500 megabit per second, 400, I don't remember, only gives you 20. So I can't ever get that 35 megabit per second upload speed back. Quick Google search on that came up with a whole bunch of ceiling fans. That was odd. I typed in, why is my upload speed so slow? Oh yeah. Anyway, it came up with this thing that said, yeah, in July, Optimum cut everybody's upload speed to 5. Why didn't I notice it till then? That's because they did it out rolling in stages and didn't fuck everybody at the same time. This way their call center wouldn't be overwhelmed. They would just do it to this group of people, and then if anybody noticed, they would call up and they'd say, sorry, we are your cable company. Tough shit and die. Anyway, that was it. Getting a cable modem. So I was an early adopter of that back from 1998. So that gives us 24 fucking years I've had a cable modem. That's scary. 24 years, almost 25. Damn. Anyways, that's going to wrap up this episode of Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.